I've completed my illusion knit and the border and backing along one side. I'm just taking out the temporary cast on so I can do the same kind of border and backing on this side. I want to create a mirror image of the border I've just completed, so I'm using my light yarn, and when I get to the end of the row, because I want a mitered corner, I'm going to knit twice into that last stitch, so increase in the last stitch and then continue knitting to mirror the border that I've already completed. When I've finished that, then I've got the two borders and backings at each end of the piece of work, and they are mirror images of each other. I'm ready now to have a look at the sides of the illusion knitting, and along the side, to create the border along that side, I'm going to pick up a stitch from every ridge end, or I'm going to pull through a loop of yarn, a stitch, by going through each ridge end and then just bringing the yarn through to the front to create a stitch on every ridge end. So nearing the end of that, and there's my last stitch. So now I'm just going to knit into those stitches again to mirror the borders and backings that I've already created on those first two sides. Mitered corners again, so it's going to be knit twice into the last stitch on the row, so you create that 45-degree angle. Just continue to knit the border and the backing on this side, then repeat for the border and backing on the final side, and when all four sides are done, it will look like this. I need to join the corners. Closer look at the corner, you can see how the miters come together, and they'll stitch together along here. The backing will fold over and go over the back of the board that I'm going to mount the piece of work on. That's part of a corner sewn together. You can see the gap where the two pieces, when you fold the backing over, will take in the thickness of the board. So you can see there where the thickness of the board will come in along that ridge of knitting. So there's the piece knitted up and then sewn together, and that's the way the facing comes together on the back of the piece of work. As an alternative to a knitted facing round the back, we could have done a crocheted facing, which would have been far quicker, and because it's around the back of the piece of work, it's never actually seen. Looking at the measurements for my knitting now, the height of the piece is about 21.5 inches, and then the length of the piece, if I measure that out, the length of the piece is just about 55 inches. The backing board I used needs to be a little larger than this so that the knitting will stretch over it and not sag. I'm going to put a couple of holes for a cord in the backing board, and I'm now going to put the hooked side of a piece of self-adhesive Velcro down the edge of the board. So just cutting it to length for the edge of the board there. But the Velcro itself is a bit too wide, so I'm going to cut that in half straight down the middle. And then stick that piece of hooked Velcro down the edge of the board, quite close to the edge, so that the facing from the illusion can stretch over the board and catch on the hooked Velcro at the back. The Velcro is going to go on all four edges, and I then need to create my hanging cord. So to create the hanging cord, I simply crochet a chain, and I'll crochet a chain at the length that I actually want this hanging cord to be. So starting off with a loop on the hook, I just pull through extra stitches through that loop until my chain is the length I want it to be. And then using the hook again to pull that chain, the ends of that chain, through the holes in the board. And then tie the two ends together. So I'm now in a position to stretch the illusion itself onto the backing board, put the corners in place, and then pull the backing up, pull the facing up and across the back onto the Velcro, and take a bit of time to make sure that the ridges of knitting line up along the edge of the board. Opposite end, corners in place, and take a bit of time to make sure that these bits of knitting, these ridges of knitting, line up with the edge of the board. Then along the side, same type of thing. Take time to make sure it's straight. And continue until you've been round all four sides and are happy that the edges are straight and the way you want them to be. The piece will then look quite impressive hanging on a wall, but it's only when you move past the piece, or you see the piece move, that the illusion starts to take effect. So as the angle of viewing tends to decrease, you start to see the illusion take effect.